Yesterday, Israel carried out a hostage rescue raid into the central portion of the Gaza Strip. We now have more details of how that operation played out. Some news from the hostages saying that they were being held in the homes of Palestinian civilians, including one who may have been an Al Jazeera reporter. We've got an updated casualty figure coming from the Gaza Ministry of Health and speculation that the United States was involved in any way, shape, or form. It's a lot to get into, so I'm glad you're here. Now, starting with details of the raid, Israel put out a pretty significant write-up of how this all played out. They said in the days before the mission, the military launched a new operation in eastern Berej. I'm going to pull up a map here to give you an idea of the area we're looking at. Again, live view a map here, zoomed in on Gaza. The area that the hostages were taken out of is here in the middle, Nusrat. And they're saying that in the days prior, they conducted a raid into Berej here, just a little southeast of Nusrat. They say the goal here was to try to feint Hamas, pull Hamas militants out of the Nusrat area into Berej, maybe think that this is the direction that Israel would move in, so the hostages further back here towards the coast are secure. And again, in the days leading up to the actual hostage rescue mission, this is the area that Israel was carrying out operations. They said the raid was carried out on Saturday morning. It would be an optimal time to surprise the Hamas terrorists holding the 4 hostages captive. Previous hostage rescue operations in Gaza have taken place overnight. Now, there's a couple different reasons if you have the ability that you want to carry out operations at night. For one, especially in a case like this, Israel has much more visibility at night than Hamas, right? That just the night vision and thermal capabilities are heavily skewed in Israel's favor. So they're going to be able to operate on a slanted battlefield. They're going to have a significant advantage. The other part is, and this was largely the case throughout our experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, when you kick someone's door in at 2 a.m, they are rattled. They're shaken. They're not able to get to their senses fast enough, in some cases, to mount any sort of serious defense. So even though Hamas likely has guards up 24 hours looking over these hostages or at certain strong points throughout the city, the majority of the population anywhere around the world is going to be asleep in the middle of the night. That is one of the major reasons why operations are generally carried out when you have the capability in the middle of the night. So notable here that Israel decided to go in midday kind of brings back thoughts of Black Hawk Down, right? One of the major issues there was in the middle of the day. The entire city saw those birds coming in and that extraction taking place. Now, Israel said that the buildings that the 4 hostages were rescued in were 200 meters apart, and they decided to go for both simultaneously because they thought that if they hit one of the objectives and went to rescue one or the other group of 3 hostages, Hamas might execute the other, or if not execute, at the very least move that hostage out of the area, which is a very reasonable expectation. One of the hostages, Argamani, was held by Hamas guards alone in the home of a Palestinian family, while the other 3 hostages were held in a separate home, also with Hamas guards. And that's an interesting little nuance here, because we're going to get into this here in a moment, where they're being held not in tunnels, not in Hamas strongholds, but in the homes of Palestinian civilians. But it's not necessarily the civilians that are guarding them. It sounds like in each one of these cases, there are armed Hamas militants in that room, or at least in the building, providing some sort of, serving as a guard of that hostage. They said the rescue for Argamani was relatively smooth, all things considered, as smooth as a hostage rescue can go. But they said a major gun battle erupted at the home where Merjan, Kozlov, and Ziv were being held. The commander of the rescue team, Zamora, was critically wounded by Hamas fire when he entered the building and would later die of his wounds. The one Israeli fatality that we know of from this operation. However, it's notable that aside from Zamora, Israel said that several more troops were wounded by shrapnel during the course of this operation. They say that now this whole operation kicked off around 11 o'clock, so this is a very quick timetable, and that's something you're going to expect in some sort of pinpoint raid like this in the middle of a dense urban area. You're not going to spend 3 hours getting there, 2 hours on the objective, and 3 more hours getting out. You have to get in and out very quickly. And Israel says by 11:15, the announcement came across the radio, quote, "The diamonds are in our hands," meaning that the hostages were now safe and secure in Israeli custody. However, they had not yet been extracted from the Gaza Strip. Now, during the course of the operation, again, daylight raid, it's going to gather a lot of attention, not just from Hamas, but from anybody in the area is going to be able to clearly see something is taking place. They said dozens of terrorists gathered around the building where the 3 hostages were held, and hundreds more armed men approached from all sides with RPGs, PKMs, and AK-47s. They said these armed militants were running through the crowded alleys and streets. Again, this is a refugee camp in the middle of Gaza. There's not a lot of places in Gaza at this point that aren't filled with civilians. So they said these militants were running through crowds of civilians as they began to open fire on the Israeli forces trying to extract the 3 hostages. According to the IDF, they said the rescue forces faced a massive amount of gunfire and RPG fire in Nusrat, leading the ground troops and the Israeli Air Force to carry out major strikes in the area. So yesterday we heard a lot of information about strikes leading up to the operation kind of being carried out in certain areas of the Nusrat camp. Now they're adding to that there were significant strikes carried out during the course of the operation. They said the strikes were targeting areas where Hamas operatives are opening fire and were aimed at protecting the rescue forces and the hostages. Again, just hearing the details of this kind of speaks to how the urgency of getting in and off or on and off of an objective very quickly and the danger of doing so in broad daylight. The updated casualty figures we have as of this morning, the Hamas government media office said that at least 210 people were killed amidst the operation. And as of this morning also, the Gaza Health Ministry said that 274 people were killed and 698 total injured during the course of the operation. Now, we do have a response coming from Hamas about how this all played out. They said, in a brutal crime that confirms the nature of this criminal fascist entity, devoid of the values of civilization and humanity, the terrorist occupation army committed a horrific massacre against innocent civilians in the Nusrat refugee camp. They said what the Nazi occupation army announced about the release of a number of its prisoners in Gaza after more than 8 months of aggression in which it used all of its military, security, and technological means, and during which it committed all crimes of massacre, genocide, siege, and starvation, will not change its strategic failure in the Gaza Strip, as our resistance still holds the largest number and has the ability to increase its share of prisoners. If I sound a little bit out of breath, that was one sentence. For what it's worth, I guess I could probably add my own punctuation in there to make it a little easier to read, but that is one long rambling sentence from Hamas. Now, the spokesperson for the Qassam Brigades, the militant wing of Hamas, Abu Obaida, put out a statement as well yesterday where he said, quote, what the Zionist enemy carried out in the Nusrat area in the middle of the Gaza Strip is a complex war crime, and the first to be harmed by it were its prisoners. He said, by committing horrific massacres, the enemy was able to free some of his captives, but at the same time, he killed some of them during the operation. The operation will pose a great danger to the enemy prisoners and will have a negative impact on their conditions and lives. So a few notes here. There's been limited interactions with the 4 hostages that have been rescued at this point, but I haven't heard anything from Israel about other hostages being killed during the course of this operation or that they were going for more than the 4 they were able to pull out. We've also not seen, released by Hamas, any evidence that other Israeli hostages were killed. And we've seen this regularly in the past, right? Hamas is very quick to show videos or pictures of deceased hostages that they will then attribute to Israeli airstrikes, Israeli operations, whatever it might be. We're 24 hours after the course of this operation, and we still haven't seen that. That information has not come out. It's also interesting here talking about how the operation will pose a great danger to the prisoners. So it's not clear if there's a couple different ways you can interpret that. One is that they're going to move these prisoners into different areas where it's harder for Israel to conduct this type of operation. There's still over 100 in Hamas captivity, or if it's something more sinister, as though they're going to take out some sort of aggression on the prisoners now because of the civilian casualties that they're saying took place in and around the Nusrat camp. Now, getting into some of the speculation here, and the internet is just, you can find any number of accounts throwing this stuff out in any direction. So I'm going to do my best to walk through what we know, what has yet to be proven, and then what is just kind of pure speculation at this point. So Almog Mayor John, one of the hostages that was rescued, said that he, Andrei Kozlov, and Shlomi Ziv were held together throughout their 8 months in captivity in a total of 4 homes. That's what I want to key in on here is, again, these hostages were not held in the tunnel networks, which are extensive, right? We've seen these, and we have seen at this point, Israel has recovered the bodies of dead hostages from tunnel networks in the past, and some of the hostages that have already been released during the negotiations talk about being held in tunnels. So they're not all in tunnels. It sounds like some are also above ground, according to the statements here by the hostages. Now, again, going back a little bit, they didn't necessarily harp on the fact that it was the civilians holding them. They were in the civilians' homes with Hamas militants there guarding them. It sounds like is what happened here. However, there was more accusations that are starting to flow today that one of those people holding these hostages may have worked for Al Jazeera. Rami Abdu, the chairman of the Euromed Human Rights Monitor, posted the names of all of the Palestinians that were killed yesterday during the course of this operation to his X account, and one of the names he listed was Abdallah al-Jamal, as well as his wife Fatima. Al-Jamal, I'll put up a picture of him here, is a journalist who has previously freelanced for Al Jazeera and currently works for the Palestine Chronicle, a newspaper based in Gaza that runs under a U.S.-based nonprofit called the People Media Project. Now, a couple important pieces here. It's not clear if the hostages were being held in his home or if he was just in the general area and was killed during the course of this operation, right? If you're talking about 2 homes that 4 hostages were taken out of, and the latest death count from the Gaza Ministry of Health is 274 people, there were not 274 people in those 2 houses. So I don't think that piece has been confirmed yet, but it's at least presenting the information that somebody with ties to Al Jazeera and a U.S.-based nonprofit was in the general vicinity of where some of these hostages were being held. Now, I've not seen, Al Jazeera said that he is not an employee, and I think factually that's correct. It looks like he was at times a freelancer for the organization as opposed to being a full-time employee on the payroll. And I've not seen any statements from this People Media Project, which again is a U.S.-based nonprofit organization. And then this one just caught fire in the past 24 hours, quickly spread across the internet like I've not seen in quite a while. And it's the idea that the United States was directly or indirectly involved during the course of this operation. So much so that Hamas and some of their affiliated Telegram channels are blaming the United States for the 200 plus Palestinian civilians that they say were killed during this operation. They're framing it, in some cases, as though it was U.S. forces on the ground conducting this raid. And there's just not, at this point, any evidence to suggest that. What I can kind of point to here as a starting point for this rumor, if you will, is the Gaza Now Telegram channel with 1.8 million followers, where at 7:41 CDT yesterday, so just a couple hours after this operation took place, they said America is participating in a major massacre carried out by the Israeli occupation army in the Nusrat camp through the seaport that was established on the shore of the Nusrat Sea in Gaza, where the occupation recently committed a massacre that claimed the lives of 100 martyrs after storming the camp through the American seaport, which America claimed was a seaport. To facilitate the aid into Gaza, it turned out to be a military port used to transport weapons to kill defenseless Palestinians. Now, I've not seen any evidence to support that. There's no, you think about all the cell phones, and we have videos of the extractions taking place. So Palestinians pulling up their cell phones and recording the Israeli helicopters taking off with the hostages. We don't have any footage of the seaport being used in a military capacity. Now, I do want to pull up a map here to show where Israel took, where the extraction took place. At least one of the helicopter extractions took place, and it's in this area where the IDF has control, and they have had control for quite a while. This is where the seaport is built, right? The IDF is going to be responsible for the security of this port and this pier. They're going to build it in an area where they have security. So in one of the videos of the helicopter taking off, you can see the pier in the background, which it shouldn't be a shock that that's the area Israel chooses to land helicopters, an area that is secure. I've not seen at this point, again, any evidence to suggest that U.S. boots were on the ground at all, that they took place in this operation, or that the port was used to facilitate this operation in any way. Now, big picture, it wouldn't be surprised at all if the United States knew this was happening. They put out a statement saying that Israel is working in conjunction with the U.S. hostage negotiation, hostage release cell. Those are planners and resources and people sharing best practices with Israel as they try to get out of Gaza, not just the Israeli citizens, but the U.S. citizens as well. That sort of behind-the-scenes coordination, sharing best practices, maybe even intelligence, is a far cry from U.S. boots on the ground pulling triggers or U.S. aircraft overhead dropping bombs. And then U.S. Central Command actually put out a statement trying to shoot this down as well, saying the humanitarian pier facility, including its equipment, personnel, and assets, were not used in the operation to rescue hostages today in Gaza. An area south of the facility was used by the Israelis to safely return the hostages to Israel. Any such claim to the contrary is false. The temporary pier on the coast of Gaza was put in place for one purpose only, to help move additional urgently needed life-saving assistance into Gaza. Now, this is a very significant claim that the U.S. was involved in the operation or facilitated the operation. And I just want to stress, for a claim that's significant, we would need some kind of evidence. And at this point, we haven't seen it, other than, again, the Gaza Now Telegram channel posting that early in the morning, and then a lot of other Hamas and Hamas-affiliated channels posting the exact same. So it looks like, from what I can see, the source of this claim is just a Telegram channel saying, believe me, it happened. Now, there was a video circulating as well that was suggesting that the Israeli forces may have moved into the area in humanitarian trucks. I haven't seen a lot of evidence one way or the other. Israel hasn't released that type of information as far as I'm aware. The video that I'll play here does show civilian vehicles moving alongside Israeli tanks. Maybe if this was the extraction, I'm not sure, but if you're trying to hide your infiltration into an area and not tip off Hamas, you're not going to drive a bunch of tanks 5 meters behind the secret vehicle that you're sneaking people in with, right? So maybe this was used in some way, shape, or form to extract people off the objective. Maybe it was commandeered because they needed more seats for the hostages, or a vehicle went down, something like that. But it's hard to tell, again, from this one clip, that Israel was clearly using humanitarian trucks or something of the sort to conduct the operation. Again, maybe that happened. I don't know that this one little clip is definitive proof in one way or the other. Now, this piece I wanted to save for last because it's a little bit of trust me, and I don't really like reporting anything like that. But there was a threat made against the Gaza pier yesterday that I think lines up with a lot of the other statements we're seeing, but that post has since been deleted. So, of course, I didn't even think to take a screenshot of it yesterday, because usually posts don't get deleted on Telegram. But the resistance committees in Palestine released a statement saying that the hostage rescue revealed that American forces on the pier took part, which makes this dock and those present on it a legitimate target for resistance strikes. Again, I wish I could, and of course, view this with the appropriate level of skepticism, because at this point, it's just a guy saying it, right? I just criticized one of the Telegram channels for saying their only evidence is, trust me, it happened, and now I'm here doing the same. I just felt like it was worth bringing up, again, to be viewed with skepticism, because it was deleted. I don't know if that means that it was spoken out of turn, or if they don't want that information publicly out there. But it also isn't a far cry from the other statements we're seeing from Hamas and Hamas-affiliated channels, where they are saying the pier played a significant part in this operation. The logical, 1 + 1 equals they're going to conduct attacks against what they now view as a military facility. So, again, intentionally saved that for the end. I think it's worth bringing up, but also don't want to accidentally spread bad information there. But I think it is worth keeping an eye on the pier, just how much information has come out in the last 24 hours trying to link the United States and the pier to this Israeli operation in Gaza. But that's all I got for now. Of course, if you're interested in this or other national security subjects, be sure to check out our Substack, which is linked in the description below. We've got ad-free, sponsor-free videos, some weekly wrap-up podcasts, as well as quite a few articles coming out 2 to 3 times a week that I think are pretty interesting. Things like Hezbollah in South America, Wagner rebranding in Africa, and quite a bit more. But anyways, linked in the description if interested. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.